Hi everyone, today I'm joined by Agnes again, and we're going to be talking again about apologetics. This time we're going to be talking about apologetics in the context of worldview and teenagers. Thank you, Agnes, for joining us today. Agnes, you were teaching last year, year one, apologetics and debate for the first time. I had two boys in that class, and it was excellent. And I actually said to Shannon in May, I think, that I was really sad that that class had come to an end, and that I didn't have a class like that to put the boys into, because it was such a quality class for them. Um, how did you find that class from the kind of teaching perspective?
I loved that class. It was a highlight of my week. It was such a good group of kids who were all quite open to discussion and they kind of gelled. I mean, quite a few of them already knew each other, so that was, I think, helpful because they already were comfortable talking. And then the ones who didn't know the others, I think because there was already that dynamic, quickly sort of got drawn into the conversation. And we talked about so many things. And I think they learned a lot of skills on how to have difficult conversations without offending each other or being offended when someone didn't agree with them. It was quite fun. Like it was quite just a lot of banter and crazy ideas. Teenagers, they'll have crazy ideas. And it's great for them just to be able to verbalize those things and bounce them off each other. Yeah, I loved it.
I think it's well what you said about the banter. It's particularly with I'm not sure if teenage girls are as bad, but particularly teenage boys, their banter can there's a line with teenage boy banter, and being able to then have those discussions and be mindful about
Yeah,
causing offense and how to do it in that kind of loving and gracious way, but also with their own personalities because
yeah.
their banter is funny. Um, how to temper it appropriately is really important. Um,
Yeah, we talked a lot about the ad hoc, and not the ad hoc, the ad hominem fallacy, where you attack the person instead of the idea. So that was sort of banned in my class. We were only allowed to attack ideas, not people. So that was my life.
my 13-year-old watched something and he was, I can't remember if it was the ad hominem fallacy or one of the other fallacies, and he was like, that is I think it might have been the ad hominem fallacy, and I looked at him thinking, wow, you have like properly learned stuff in the class and like
That's
really clever
awesome.
things.
Yeah, it's the worst thing is though when your kids start pointing out fallacies in the things you say to them. I taught you this stuff. You can't use it against me.
I had that with another one of the boys in your class actually pointed out that with me when we were having a chat about something. He said, Emma, that is I can't even remember what it was. I'm like, thank you
Yeah.
for educating me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It is good though, because but you know then that you're at the stage where you're both challenging each other, that they're really um gaining real skills where they are almost becoming a peer to you, an intellectual peer, and
Yeah.
where you it just becomes really interesting to have talks at dinner time and like they're actually giving you ideas rather than like this being, when you're young, it's kind of all one way. But when they're teenagers, you actually start learning so much from them, being stretched by their crazy ideas.
I think one of the things that I found really interesting was after, because your class was like Thursday afternoon, it finished about 5:30, and we would then be having dinner as a family. And this would, on a Thursday afternoon, the boys would come through and the conversations that you were having in the class would kind of spill over to the dinner table, and I'd be hearing all that they were learning and chatting about, and the banter and the boy nonsense and the fun, and it was just really lovely. They were just so animated coming out of that class. And I know that's something that you're really quite passionate about, this idea of family discussion round the table about difficult topics.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the the reasons I like the debate is because when you give when you give teenagers a controversial issue, no matter how introverted or shy they are, or like, some kids like to talk, some don't.
Mhm.
But if you throw a controversial enough issue out, it'll bring everyone out of their shell. And the more controversial it is, the more it's like it gets them talking and thinking really complicated thoughts and having to look at things from so many angles, and it really sort of stimulates their brain because quite often, like teenagers, they start off quite black and white about a topic, like especially if they haven't really thought it through. And then you start like throwing little questions at them and they start to realize, oh, it's not quite as straightforward as I thought. And then you're like, what about this opinion and what about that opinion? And like you just have to sort of fight through until you find something, a sort of balanced opinion. And yeah, it's really that was my one of my goals is that they would like want to have these conversations, and if they're having them with their families, that's even better. I
Mhm.
think, that's just I think really important for teenagers, not just that they're talking about controversial things, but that they have a safe place where they can ask the questions that are on their mind. And I think sometimes parents are like, if their kids questioning something that their parents maybe hold dear, parents can start panicking. But I think it's really healthy for teenagers to be questioning things because if they don't do it with you, they will do it when they leave you. And then you're not there to talk it through with them, to give them those balancing thoughts and then to help them think from like a biblical perspective and maybe to like temper the extreme ideas they have with, something that'll just bring balance. And I think if that's one thing I could encourage families, it's just to not freak out if their kids start being because kids like teenagers will start thinking about topics that you don't maybe want them like the things we've sheltered them from. And I think it is right when they're younger to
Mhm.
shelter them because they are more black and white and not really ready to think in that nuanced way. Um, but once they're teenagers, they are start to become really interested in controversial things and
Mhm.
sexuality and politics and all sorts of things that maybe parents shy away from and maybe maybe don't feel prepared to talk about. But I think like it's really just the right time when they're teenagers is to make that safe space for them and not shy away from the difficult
Mhm.
topic.
I think one of the really good things about having the debate class and the apologetics class, um, as this extension of that discipleship for our kids, is our family, our homes can be, in the best possible sense of the world, a little bit like an echo chamber. Our
Yeah,
kids have been raised in our own family culture, our own ideas, and then when you're in that kind of class setting, this is what you said, that you've got this group of kids and they're bringing to the table the things that they've had in their own homes or their own ideas that they've been formulating. And it's that pooling of ideas like, oh, people think a little bit differently to me. We have the same kind of broad biblical worldview, but within that there's nuance and there's shades of grey and there's different ideas. and it broadens that ability to think through a difficult subject in that really safe environment and come at it in a different way. And as well, just the fact that a lot of parents are not, we're not equipped to answer all the questions. There's so many really difficult things in our modern culture that are hard for just your average parent to be able to. I actually don't know how to answer these questions, and this class has been so good, and I think that the year two class is going to be just amazing. It really going into to these kind of big worldview issues that we have today. What led you to do the year two? Because you this wasn't on the cards like in May, because as I said, I was had that conversation with Shannon in May, and here we are in July. So, what led you to do a year two apologetics and debate class?
So, like what, so I did the first term was apologetic and logic, and then the second term was debate. And when I was doing it, I was like, I could really do a full year of apologetics and a full year of debate. And when I was done apologetics, I felt like there's just so much more, like we just sort of scratched the surface. Because what I focused on in year one was like the foundations
Mhm.
of the sort of the defense of the Christian faith. So the intellectual foundations, the reasons we believe there's a God, the reasons we believe that the Bible has authority, the reasons we believe in the resurrection, like those kind of really important building blocks for to know that Christianity is on a solid foundation and it actually takes more faith to not believe than it does to believe because there's so much evidence. And so, um, like that's what we really focused on. And in year two, what I really want to focus on, and the thing I think is also important, is like how do we live that out in this crazy culture that pretty soon our kids are going to be leaving home. They're going to face like, can you please put your pronouns in your email and stuff, all that kind of thing. So we did actually talk something about that. We did in one of our debate classes, we talked about should we use the people's preferred pronouns, and I got them to watch a debate between Preston Sprinkle and Sean McDowell, who have slightly different opinions about that. And then I got them to write down what they thought their best points were, and then where they sort of agreed or disagreed. So we did talk some about that, but I just really want to go a lot more deeper into understanding the worldviews that they're the people who are in, so the people they will be working with are being indoctrinated
Mhm.
with these kind of ideas. And those are the people they're going to have to relate to. So, how not only to understand where those people are coming from, but how do you communicate
Mhm.
the truth of Christianity in a way that it's going to resonate in this culture? So, that's kind of the next level, I thought. And something I'm really passionate about anyway is just that as Christians, we don't just retreat from the culture, that we don't hide away from it, that we're not scared of it, but that we engage it, that we like create art that would speak truth into the culture, and
Mhm.
that we communicate in a way that people can that we speak the language of this culture. Because I think that, like, if you think about Paul in Athens, right, he used the poetry of the people as a sort of touch point in order to share the gospel. So he could not have, oh, my phone's ringing, sorry. He could not have, I'm just going to turn off. Sorry about this.
No worries.
So he couldn't have spoken into the culture in that way unless he had studied the culture. So he knew their poetry, he knew their idols, and that gave him like an opening
Mhm.
to be able to speak in a way that they could really hear.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's important for us as Christians to study the culture and to have language that resonates.
Mhm.
Um,
Found we did that book study, I think about 2 years ago now, the Mama Bear Apologetics.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
kind of looked at those kind of key cultural issues, and kind of the kind of Christian response to them. And one of the things she said that really stood out to me was this idea of common ground. When you're talking to
yeah,
somebody who's very different, find that point of commonality that you what can you agree on before you go into what you disagree? And the idea of studying the culture is that you can find that point that you both
mhm.
agree on. So you're not coming at it as enemies ready to kind of do battle with kind of intellectual ideas, but that you come at that kind of relational and human way. And I found that really quite that it just changed my whole perspective on evangelism and how to relate to people. It was just I found that really helpful, and that it's the same kind of idea of what you're discussing here.
Yeah, because every non-Christian, they are made in the image of God. And so they are going to have like the reflection of God in their life, in their work, in their art. There will be like some, like, even if there's a lot of bad, like, there's also, you'll be able to find something. Like, it says, like, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And that God has not just left, the non-Christian world. Like, he is, he does reveal himself in all creation. And so I think it's important for our kids to know not everything non-Christian is completely bad. Like, there will be bad, there will be good. That's one of the Mama Bear apologetics things, is to find what's good and then spit out the bones. And I think that's really important. It's also important for them to know not everything Christian is good. Like, I often play my kids a clip of a sermon and I'll say, spot the heresy. And even with people I respect,
Mhm.
I'll say, we'll pull apart the sermon and say, he really took this out of context. Like, let's look at the context. Like, the way he did this word study was a bit sloppy, but we really respect this person and he did all these other
Mhm.
things right. So just because it's so, like, if they think it very black and white, like, oh, I can listen to not to Christian music and it will be edifying. Well, it might not be. Like, there's some really bad lyrics in Christian music.
Mhm.
And then, like, my son Elijah preached in our church and he actually took the lyrics from a heavy metal, non-Christian heavy metal band, and he went through them. And it was like, it was one of the most powerful things for some of the people in our church. Like, there was a couple of brand new young adult Christians, like, they just come to Christ, and they were just like, because it showed like the despair
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
it is in the world in a way that you just couldn't have done without taking their own very own words. Like, it was just showed you the
Honest.
meaninglessness. Yeah, it was so raw and honest. And
Mhm.
they just said, like, that really spoke to me because it was their language
Yeah.
and it was their culture.
Mhm.
And they were like, that, I just, like, that meant so much to me.
Yeah.
That, so I think, like, yeah, it's that touch point, like Paul used in with the Athenians.
Yeah. So
We
the
can
year
you,
two, your year two apologetics is going to concentrate on that idea of worldview.
yeah. So we're going to look at worldview and culture and kind of, like, we'll look at, for example, the trans ideology. We'll look at that and sort of trace sort of the intellectual genealogy of, um right back to Rousseau. Like, he was the one who said, like, you have this sort of um good. identity in you, and society tries to corrupt you and like restrain you from expressing. And that's really the beginning of that whole idea of um, this individual identity that is not connected to your community. It's not connected to your biology. It's like completely psychological and emotional. And just to understand, like ideas have consequences.
Mhm.
Like when you start to give emotions that much authority in our culture, like it leads to some crazy. And like the Bible says, guard your heart. Like the heart is deceitful. So we need to like weigh our emotions. We need to be careful about our emotions. And
Mhm.
so just yeah, trying to look at the roots of ideas and then the consequences of ideas. Because ideas have consequences. Like you think of communism and
Yeah.
how many people died because of that idea. Like,
Mhm.
and then feminism. I was just thinking about this, how we always think like atheistic communism, killed, I think, 100 million people through all the like communist regimes.
Mhm.
But feminism and the sexual revolution through abortion, like there's been,
Yeah.
I think, 1.7 billion abortions.
Wow.
So you think like that idea is actually even
Mhm.
more deadly than atheistic communism. But it's because we don't see it, and it's not as like we're not seeing dead bodies everywhere.
Mhm. It's
Maybe we don't,
hidden.
yeah, we don't realize like how evil, how much evil is
Yeah.
spread.
That's it sounds amazing. You mentioned your son Elijah, your eldest son, and he's in full-time ministry. And he spends a lot of his time engaging with youth culture, and he's a young evangelist. How has his experiences shaped your thinking, your own thinking about how to prepare teens for the culture and the time we are in?
That's a really good question, actually, because he has shaped my thinking hugely. Because I quite often check with him, like when I'm doing apologetics, I'll say to him, like, remember I was doing that, we did quite a few classes about evolution and Darwinism and
Yeah.
naturalism, and how that has led to a lot of atheism and away from a culture that believes in God. And I think as a homeschool mom, we make a big deal about it. So I was like, Elijah, how many people, because his ministry is mostly street evangelism, not all of it, but he spends a lot of time just talking to people on the streets, and especially like youth or young adults, kind of that age bracket. So I was like, how many people bring up evolution as a reason that they don't believe in God? And he's like, zero, mum. Nobody cares. Nobody's thinking about evolution anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny because we often make such a big thing of it in the home ed community. Like if our kids believe in evolution, they're gonna lose their faith. But he's like, that is not the issue among youth at the moment. It's all about justice and equality and Gaza, and the church supports Israel, and all like that's what they're thinking about. Like
Mhm.
evolution does not come into the equation. So I was like, God, like, and that was partly why I was thinking, like, I think it is an important foundation for kids for their own faith, but
Mhm.
obviously it's not that important when in relating to the present culture, because it's like the youth have moved so far past the idea that there is an absolute truth,
Mhm.
that that there might be evolution, there might not. Like, who cares? It's
Let's be
not
honest,
even.
there's the rise of flat earthism. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's,
we're definitely post-truth. So like, yeah, that all that logical thinking, you're thinking like, how do they engage people who actually don't care about logic and
Mhm.
reasoning? And and they're very emotionally driven and justice driven, which is like a reflection of their God-given
Yeah.
like soul. Like we should care about justice, and often like Elijah says they would perceive that the church doesn't, and that makes them wary. Oh.
And which brings us back to that whole idea of finding that common ground. Whereas justice isn't
Mm,
common ground. The church, that the foundation of God's throne is righteousness and justice, and just part of God's whole character is justice. And
mhm.
therefore, there's a point where the idea of caring for innocent people and suffering of people, that's a point of common agreement that can then open up those conversations. But I think you're right, is that emotion and fairness and justice and what's right and wrong and the suffering that
Yeah.
that people see, and young people are deeply passionate about these things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. How
Yeah.
can parents help and prepare their teens for the culture in which we're living in? The world has changed. We just said that just now about the fact that people don't care about evolution and the idea of the absolute truth. The world has changed so much from when we were in our late teens and 20s. Um,
Mm.
and it's in a state of unimaginable change now. Um,
Yeah.
how can parents prepare their teens for this culture? Are there resources that parents can tap into? Um, what kind of recommendations would you give?
Yeah. So that's a huge question. And um, like I think sort of our approach has been anyway, just to like gradually expose your kids to the ideas that they are going to have to face. Like obviously you'll have a sense of when they're ready, and that will be different for each child. But like my goal was that we would have like talked about all the most like shocking and all the things that really would attack their faith in the world, that we would have wrestled with those things with them,
Yeah.
and that they would that we'd give them tools to think things through critically. So like to really work on critical thinking, how like looking at sort of, so I'll like play my kid, or I'll post them a meme from, so we have a little WhatsApp family chat, and I'm always like posting like controversial things. So that today I snapshotted a person had asked about whether they should get baptized. They were asking on a thread, and they were like, should I get baptized? Because what if I sin afterwards? And they were getting really, they were all in real knots about it. And it was like, they're obviously had kind of frozen in fear of, they were like, does baptism get rid of original sin? Like they were asking really big questions. I'm like, be interesting to see how my kid would answer this. So I just threw it on the family chat. So no one's responded yet. So we'll have to talk about it at dinner. But I just want to see how they thought through baptism theologically, and throwing out like something like just controversial like that. Like sometimes I post like things from parent groups where like, parents are like, should I let my kid do this? And I just like, how would you like see this? Like, would you like sometimes I don't want to say it in case there's someone listening to
I think
it. But like,
it's a really interesting question. From a pastoring point of view, it'd be really interesting to throw that out to a church. So how would you answer this guy and see kind of like where does the church stand? How's the church
yeah,
thought through these things theologically? Because I think a lot of adults would struggle to know how to actually
yeah,
answer that question.
yeah, exactly. So I like to give them really hard. things to think about. And they like that too. I think
Mhm.
like they find it fun because they're quite, debatey, quite kind of kid. They like something meaty. So I'll post a meme that I feel like has uh maybe an ungodly worldview, and I'll ask them like, what's good, what's bad, or
Mhm.
what's the worldview, what's the premise behind this, or um, the other thing I do is if I hear people use anything as a cultural reference, like in a conversation, like in a sermon, like if there's a TV program that people are always referring to, like The Office, right?
Mhm.
People always refer to The Office, or I mean, I wouldn't like. There's some I wouldn't try again, but even if it's something like I think is mostly inappropriate, I'll find a clip of it that I can show my kids on YouTube and we'll watch it together. I'm like, this is a really popular program. Like, what are the assumptions behind this? Like, because there's all like, and I think what's interesting to do is to watch TV programs and films from different eras.
Mhm.
Because, like, if you watch a TV program from our era, there's always a trans person or a gay person or and it's part of the quota, like they
Yeah.
have to have them. It's just like part of our diversity quota. But then we'll watch something from the 90s and they'll have completely different values. And like if you go even further back and watch some really old films, like sometimes it's actually really shocking, like the racist comments or the sexist comments that you would never have today.
Yeah.
But then they have some really strong family values and it's just really interesting to see. I think when you contrast things like that, it's easier to see how like what are we swimming in right now
Mhm.
that we're just so used to it that we barely see it anymore. But I really would recommend Mama Bear Apologetics to any parent. I think she's got a book on sexuality as well, which I haven't read, but I'm sure it's really helpful. The like I think sexuality, LGBTQ stuff is so huge, and I think a lot of parents are just like terrified of it, and they just want to sort of shelter. But I think it's really important, and like my kids are almost sick of me talking about it because I bring it up so much. But I think it's just one of the zeitgeists that we have to that we have to deal with as a church and as families. And someone I found really helpful is Preston Sprinkle. I mentioned that I had got the
Yeah.
kids to watch a debate with him. Sean McDowell. Sean McDowell's probably a little um, less nuanced, but really good as well. But a Preston Sprinkle, this is kind of his area of study, and he's very smart. He's a PhD theologian,
Mhm.
a very like well-grounded evangelical, but he's very pastoral
Yeah.
and very compassionate towards the LGBTQ community and not scared to have conversations with them and to invite them on his podcast and to really have those difficult
Mhm.
conversations. And he has actually written a book for teens called Living in a Grey World. And he's written on trans, he's written People to Be Loved about gay people. And he just has just a lovely approach, I think, because
Mhm.
you can really sense the love of Christ in his attitude, but he doesn't really compromise on the Bible. Like
Yeah.
um he's not wishy-washy at
Mhm.
all. So I really recommend him. And if you don't, I don't know, if you're not comfortable having those conversations, like I think we really need to get over it, to be honest. Like, because this is a massive thing. Like
Yeah.
the kids that are the same age as our kids that they will be in the workforce with are watching porn. Like it's very like sex is normalized and not just like graphic kind of things that I don't even understand. But yeah, so like we can't not talk about it.
Yeah.
Like they have to have a really strong foundation. Not just like what does the Bible say, but why is that a better story for your life? Like why is the Christian sexual ethic, which is so strict, in comparison to any like well the secular sexual ethic and many sexual ethics through history, like it's very strict. Like why is that a better way to live? And not just to see it as rules, 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 but this is like a way to flourish in life, to have that one partner who, God brings you together with, who you want to serve him with, and like how the family is a place for nourishing, like not just nourishing the body, but nourishing the mind, and like just celebrating life together, to have this home where we can explore the world, where we can explore ideas, where we can do art, where we can, just to really celebrate the family. I think it's spiritual warfare in this day and age.
I would totally recommend the Mum Bear Apologetics as an entry level for mums because it's really readable. um,
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's just really readable for anyone to be able to access. If this is something you're just so new to, that is a great resource because you're absolutely right. We can't be sticking our head in the sand because the
Hmm.
culture is so now anti-God, and it is the culture that we are raising our teens to go out into the workplace, into the mission field. Um,
Yeah.
Something you said about the wee snippets of television programs and things that you watch and how it's changed. Something I've often thought about. So I went to school in the 90s, and I was in my formative teenage years was spent watching the sitcom Friends, like many of my generation, and thinking like Christian girl and my best friend Christian girl, we would watch Friends, and when everyone would talk about it at school, it was the thing we talked about, the thing that everyone's talking about, the program everyone's talking about. That was the program everybody talked about. But the whole premise of this is these young adults who their core relationships are their friends, not their family,
Yeah.
and the level of promiscuity is
Hmm.
horrendous.
Yeah.
It's so normalized and it's laughed about,
Yeah.
and some of them are having different partners every weekend, and
Mm.
it was so normalized. And I think that laid the foundation for our generation and how
Mm.
our generation then viewed um, sexual morality. And then off the back
Yeah.
of that came the sitcom Will and Grace, which the main it was the first, I think it was the first big sitcom where the main character was gay. And again,
Okay.
it's funny, and the characters are nice and they're relatable, and you become emotionally invested in their story, and you want the
Yeah.
relationships to last. Again, it's that kind of sowing these seeds which um normalize a sexual morality that is not what the Bible has.
Yeah, definitely.
And as parents, I think a lot of I think we can often just say, well, this is what the Bible says. The Bible says marriage is one man, one woman, and you don't have sex outside of marriage. Close Bible, that's it. That's very kind of basic. But young adults, they want more
Hmm.
of an explanation. Actually, what the Bible says is true for really important reasons. Yes, it's
Yeah.
God's law, but that God's ways are actually the healthiest ways for people to function. And
Hmm.
that there's and it's not that you're blindly. what you said right back at the beginning when you said about that foundation, that intellectual foundation of reason and logic for the Christian faith, that our faith is built on that sure foundation, and that atheism becomes the thing that needs more faith than belief in God. The same is true for sexual ethics,
Yeah,
that there is that foundation of truth that we can really look at and educate our kids about.
yeah. If you look at like people who got married and have their one sexual partner, they show the highest levels of marital satisfaction of anyone. And the more sexual partners you have before marriage, the less satisfied you are like in that marriage with that one partner. And I mean you can go into like I've gone into like all the diseases and stuff that are going around young people. Like some of them are horrific. And I was talking to a doctor, and he said like the rates of oral cancer in young people are skyrocketing. And he said like 20 years ago, you would never have seen oral cancer in a younger person. It was just an old person thing, someone who'd been smoking all their life or something. And he says it's because of oral sex. It's been so normalized in
Wow.
our culture. And actually, um, three partners puts you at a much, much, much higher risk of oral cancer. So, like, there's a lot of health
Mhm.
issues at stake as well. Like, it's really playing with fire.
Yeah.
But as you said, like friends, it assumes you're doing it. Like,
Yeah.
people assume that you're gonna go with a date, you're gonna sleep with the guy you've just met. Like that's just the thing. That's
Yeah.
normal, and it's actually crazy.
There was also some like pornography was normal. There was like the kind of running joke that the guys would be watching porn, and it was just like that was
Mm,
normal. That's just what they did. It was just like it was funny, and it wasn't like that
yeah.
complete normalization of things that should not be normalized in our culture. And I shudder to think what friends would be like today if they were doing a remake for today's
Yeah,
young adults. Um,
that is true.
yeah, it probably
A
is.
whole new world
It is a whole new world, and it's
from when,
changing at such a rapid rate. So
yeah,
if you've got teenagers and you're looking at wanting I've got our apologetics year one and our apologetics year two. I'll link the podcast for the year one class because to do the year two class, year one is a prerequisite. Is that correct?
yes, it
Yes.
is.
Because you'd go through all those different foundational things, all the foundations of logic and how to spot the fallacies. So if to do the year two class, first you would need to do the year one class. So put all those links down below. Agnes, it's been an absolute delight to have you on. It's always so interesting listening to you speak. You've got such just a wonderful mind for being able to think about these things in relation to family and raising our kids for the generation that they're in is a real gift that you have for the body of Christ. So thank you so much. And yeah,
You.